introduce Carolyn Reyes. Carolyn Reyes is she's a policy director with Cirrus Policy Research, where she provides trainings and technical assistance relating to the collection of SOGI data, which is sexual orientation, gender, expression, and identity. She has also been involved in the development of the LGBTQ plus policy in the juvenile justice system. She's been working on the behalf of LGBTQ plus youth in juvenile justice and child welfare for the past 17 years in various capacities. Carolyn holds graduate degrees in social work, law, and theology, and manages to use all of them in service of LGBTQ youth of color. So this will be an interactive and hopefully a fun workshop for you all. So with
Great.
that,
You're going to be doing most of the talking, by the way, so I hope you really got a good lunch and are ready, even though you try to sit far back. I don't know if I'm going to start here and go down here and then end up sitting in somebody's chair or something, because it seems really far away here. But I don't know if my voice is probably strong enough to handle. Yeah? I think sometimes folks need the added, I don't want to, okay, we'll start with this. And maybe when I get into the dance routine, I'll do that right out front. And anyway, my name is Carolyn, again, and my pronouns are she, her, hers. And like Kathy said, I'm policy director at Cirrus Policy Research. And today, we are here at a workshop called Hidden in Plain Sight, working with LGBTQ plus youth in juvenile justice. Thank you so much for being here. Like I said, this is going to be really interactive. It's not going to be a whole bunch of me talking, which is great. This is my first time presenting after Zoom, in person after Zoom, so this is like really exciting for me. So I might I don't know what I might do. I might make my phone ring or my kid walk in or something so that it's like Zoom-like. But I actually had to wear clothes today, which bummed me out a little bit. No, thank you so much for coming and for being interested in the topic. So I'll start with, let's see, what we're going to be talking about today. And we're going to start out with terminology, as is usual when we're talking about this population of young people. And then we'll talk about pathways into the juvenile justice system. Then asking youth about their SOGI, and I won't tell you what that is because I'm going to ask you in a minute. Although Kathy, if you were listening, she gave it away. Then we're going to put it into practice. We're going to do some practicing and look at some vignettes and some interview practice. And then we'll look at some tips for developing juvenile justice policy supporting LGBTQ plus youth. All throughout, we can ask questions. I mean, we're not a really big group, so informal is awesome. Is that okay?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Okay. Okay, let's get started. So we're going to talk about language and concepts. Let me get a sense of how familiar you are with language related to LGBTQ people in general and young people specifically. Hold up from 1 to 5. 1 is I know stuff, but I'm not really comfortable. And 5 is I could be the Grand Marshal at the Pride Parade this year. Okay, so let me see your hands. Keep them up so I can I'm not putting a face to a number, I'm just trying to get a sense. So it's kind of like in the middle a little bit. There are some 5s and there are some 1s, so the 5s can help out. You can totally make mistakes in here. I hope you know that. I usually have some guiding group agreements and stuff that talks about ouch and oops. You know, when you make a mistake, you just do oops, my bad, and how in whatever way you want to say that. And ouch, that didn't feel very good. I don't know how well people know each other in here, so I don't know, how comfortable you feel, but I'd like to make the space as comfortable as possible for you to be able to ask questions, make mistakes. How do people feel about me, inserting language if there's somebody who says something that's not quite, that Great. Or there's a better way of saying it. Is that okay? Yeah, okay. Excellent. Sometimes we have a slide that talks about words that you avoid and terms that you avoid, but I left that one out this time. I didn't want to overwhelm people. But again, please feel free to make mistakes. I made them all the time, so. And language is always changing, right? Young people are always making some new stuff up. It's hard to keep up with it all. So, and it varies based on culture and region. And so once we think we've got it, we've got to relearn it. So I think it is important to go over terms with you right now. So who knows what SOGI is? Okay, so I think the hands are low, so I don't know if that's like fear or like maybe. Okay, so about a little bit over half of you know what SOGI is. So like I said, Kathy spoiled it, so I hope you feel really bad about that. SOGI stands for sexual orientation, gender identity, and gender expression. These are three very different concepts, though they work together. And people tend to conflate them often, right? They say, are you, that person looks feminine, so that male person looks feminine, so they must be gay, right? When that's about their gender expression. So, again, they're all separate from each other, and you can't tell someone's sexual orientation by looking at them, right? Some smart aleck in one of the trainings said to me, well, what if they have a shirt that says, I'm gay, and at our pride parade? Can you assume then? And I think you shouldn't assume, even if somebody's got a shirt on that says, I'm gay at a pride parade. Although I would probably assume, to tell you the truth. This is being video recorded?
By the way, everybody, feel free to, if you have questions or anything like that, she is asking you, because we're not passing around a microphone, so go ahead and shout it out. When Carolyn asks you to say it.
Great. Okay, so we'll go into each of these. Sexual orientation is, what is sexual orientation? I guess I'll ask you, since I said you're going to do most of the talking. Do you want to go ahead and? Yeah, who you like, who you're attracted to, right? And these are some terms that are associated with sexual orientation. This is not an exhaustive list by any means. Like I said, if you've been around young people, you know that it's not exhaustive by any means. People probably know what lesbian and gay are when you're attracted to people of the same sex as you. And bisexual when you're attracted to, yeah, please.
My BA is in gender studies, so I'm really excited to learn what you're saying, right? How everything's changing. But I don't know if we're going to get into it, but I feel like there is a small bias against bisexual people sometimes, because. And I feel like that's from the hetero and the gay world sometimes because, people will say, oh, well, they'll either say, okay, you're attracted to everything, which is not true. Or they'll say, kind of pick a side. So I don't know if you'll get it.
I wasn't necessarily going to get into that, but you can bring up anything and I'll talk about it, or we can talk about it together. Bisexual, like I said, has to do with being attracted to both males and females. And people, we live in a binary society, right? Binary meaning that there's two of everything, mostly. It's black and white. So male and female is a very entrenched binary that we live in. So I think that folks who are not in one end of the spectrum or another tend to be looked at down on, right? And folks say, well, you got to choose something, choose a side. And like you mentioned, that's coming from both the LGBTQ folks and straight folks and cisgender folks. So I don't know if there's anything else about that you wanted to talk about.
I just feel like they get a bad rap, and so just so that sometimes we need to see the crossing of or the intersectional things that happen within any one group.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for pointing that out. Questioning is what it says. You're questioning your sexual orientation. You're not sure yet. Who knows what queer is? You've heard it, right? Go ahead.
Basically anything and everything encompassing being LGBTQ. It could mean a number of things. Some identify as being queer, but it isn't really, it's not really specifically associated with any one orientation.
That's perfect. Did everybody hear that? I don't know if people over there could hear. Could you hear that? Yeah, it's an umbrella term that covers everybody who's not, basically everyone who's not straight and not cisgender. And we'll talk about what cisgender means in a minute. And then heterosexual and straight. And then how about pansexual? More and more we're seeing young people identify as pansexual. Not just young people, but we're talking about young people today. So who knows what pansexual means? Who does not have a degree in gender studies? I'm joking. What was that? Yeah. It's folks who have an attraction to people of all genders, or where gender doesn't matter to them. They're just attracted to folks generally. And to folks across the gender spectrum. So we'll talk about the gender spectrum in a minute. So that is sexual orientation. And like I said, that is separate from the next concept, which is gender identity. And who can say what gender identity is? Please.
It's basically your internal, like, how you feel, so it doesn't really have anything to do with anybody else.
Right. It's an internal sense of who you are in terms of man or woman, something in between, something else altogether, right? It's not about attraction to, it's internal. And it's hardwired, and we'll talk a little bit more about it later. But gender identity, these are some terms, again, not an exhaustive list of gender identities. Woman, girl, transgender. Who knows what transgender means? Sorry. Yeah, can you go?
When you identify as a different gender than what you were born, or than the sex that you were born.
Right. So like you were assigned female at birth, but you identify and you know yourself to be as male. And that's a transgender man or a transgender boy. Yes.
Do you have any statistics on how that's established? If a child is born, if it's undecided when they're born?
If it's undecided, I'm going to talk about something related to that, and we can talk about that in a minute. So folks have transgender. And let's think of who's somebody who we know in media who's transgender. How about Caitlyn Jenner? Do you know Caitlyn Jenner? Caitlyn Jenner is a woman, is a transgender woman, was assigned male at birth, but is a woman and identifies as such, right? Okay. So, and then how about cisgender? I used that word a few times already. Did you want to answer that one? Yeah, because you raised your hand earlier and I didn't catch you.
I guess it's where you identify as the sex that you were born with.
Right. You identify with the sex that you were assigned at birth. I was assigned female at birth, and I identify as female, so I'm a cisgender woman. That word is becoming more and more popular as well. I mean, you're hearing it probably more in the news and media. Maybe not as much as transgender, but it's coming up more. How about gender fluid, gender queer, non-binary? Let's have some fun. Yes.
That's the one I want to talk about, because with our probation placement kids, it seems like they're all saying they're gender fluid. And I don't question, are you really? It's just, it comes up, they're like, well, I'm fluid.
They're all saying it?
They're all saying, I'm not exaggerating. So, is there anything else here for probation? These kids are identifying as gender fluid. Like, you don't want to question them, but are you doing this because your two best friends are doing it? It's like, they're all fluid. Is that a new thing, or?
I mean, I think that none of this stuff is new. It exists across the country and across the world in different cultures, and that it's become more common to hear about it, and so more people are able to come out, and like it's an option now, right? Because there's a word for it. Just like being LGBT and any other, being gay or lesbian, sometimes people didn't know that was a thing. And they live their life, people from other generations who live their life knowing they were different, knowing they felt this way, but not having a word for it, or not knowing that other people were they were gay or lesbian. So gender fluid is now becoming very popular, but it's not that people are making it up. And I know that you're not saying that. You're wondering, and I appreciate your honesty saying, I don't know if people are doing it because other people are saying it or what, but it's a legitimate gender identity. So what is it? What are these terms? Oh, did you have something you wanted to say?
Question. Can you help me understand the difference between cisgender and identifying as a woman or a man, and also pansexual, and the difference between bisexual?
Okay, so the first one was cisgender and identifying as a woman or a man. So cisgender is that you identify with the sex that you were assigned at birth. So cis, I think, means same, right? Does it? See, I told you I need help and don't know everything. Cisgender is the same. So, like I said, I was assigned female at birth and identify as female. Does that?
So would that be the same as saying, like, I'm born a man, I identify as a man? So is it interchangeable?
Say that again?
Or is cisgender and identifying as like a man or a woman, they're interchangeable? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just interesting because we have a word for, we tend to have words for others, right? Like we heard about transgender before we heard about cisgender. We labeled something and that was other, right? And it was like, well, yeah, but it's not other. It's a part of a spectrum, and there are other people who are just as much, that are not others either, and they're cisgender people. You know what I'm saying? Okay, and then bisexual and pansexual. Bisexual assumes there's a binary, like I said, of male and female, and folks are attracted to both. And here we're talking about that there's a spectrum of genders, and pansexual folks are attracted to people across the gender spectrum. So they might be attracted to people who are male, gender fluid, transgender, just across the spectrum. I'm going to use that word a lot. Is that clear? Or clearer? Okay, you're welcome. So what is it? What are these terms? Gender fluid, gender queer, non-binary? I'm going to actually go right behind you if you don't mind. Yeah.
Gender fluid is sort of falling somewhere in between the two, kind of male and female genders. And then non-binary is neither, so we may identify with either or. Gender queer is somewhere across the spectrum.
Yeah, I mean, all of these terms have in common that they're not stuck in the binary system of gender, right? So gender fluid, right, folks that move beyond, you might get some of those young people. Do you get some of those that maybe come in one day and they say they're one gender, and they come in another time and they're like now another gender, and, right.
I had to call my woods person. They're very helpful. Because serious, like we had a biological boy saying, I'm a girl. I don't want to be in the boys' SGRTP. I'm from Orange County. That had never happened, and I thought it was a big deal, but we all needed that education all the way up. We didn't know what to do.
Right.
So the woods person was awesome.
Oh, that's great to hear.
These are things that we are dealing with this. We don't want to violate rights.
Right.
We want to keep the kids safe, but then, so we did. Only for her to turn around and say, no, I want to be boys.
Because young people, hashtag young people, right?
It's a learning experience
Oh, well.
for all, but we need to know. Because
Yeah,
this affects their rights and
that's right.
their well-being.
Yeah, their well-being, which is of utmost importance.
Dramatic pause.
All right, yes.
I have a question related to probation placement. If somebody is non-binary, do they have a separate unit that they would go into, or would they need to choose between the female or the male unit?
We've had that come up too. That's interesting you say. One example, so we had to have several meetings. That was not an easy answer. How do we keep you safe? That was the primary goal. So where are you most safe? And it was like, okay, in the girls' home. For these reasons, and then, no, but maybe the boys, it took some time. Finally, we got lucky, we found a boys' home where she would not have a roommate. And we just got very lucky, because they're a community, you know, usually there's a roommate, and it worked out perfectly, and she was very respected. But I was wondering, what if we couldn't find that?
Right.
You know, it was asking a lot of local, who accepts transgender, who accept, we got lucky, we just happened to find someone got or left, finished their program, and we had a separate alone room, and it worked.
Yeah, so you had to get creative.
We can't do that.
You have to get creative when you're working in a binary system, and like probation is like, wow, how binary does it get, right?
It's our first for us.
Yeah, and you're in Orange County?
Yes.
So you're like, wow, and how about Two-Spirit? Yes.
I'm gonna pray that what I learned in my sociology agenda class, that I remember, and it happened on intersect.
It doesn't, but we'll get to that.
Okay.
You're ahead of the game.
Oh, okay.
Two-Spirit. Anybody? Okay, I won't make you say what it is, but raise your hand if you know what it is. Okay, you don't want to say. Two-Spirit is a term used by some indigenous groups, not all, to talk about people who have both masculine and feminine energy. So again, it's not used by every Native American group or indigenous group of people, but some do. And we've been seeing actually more young people across the country identify as Two-Spirit. So this also goes back to, I think, what we were talking about, like, does this stuff exist? Is it new? Does it exist? And it's been existing for a really long time in different cultures. Okay, so we got sexual orientation was one thing, who you're romantically attracted to, and we have gender identity, which is this internal sense of who we are in terms of male, man, woman, something else, something in between. And then lastly, we have we have intersex before we go on. Did you want to say what intersex is?
Well, at least you know I didn't cheat, look at the PowerPoint, and I thought to that.
It's totally fine.
But no, because when we studied it, I didn't know, I knew like about all of the other ones. And so when we did study it in my class, it's for people who have both the sexual reproductive anatomies, and they live that way with both of them. And what was just so heartbreaking to me is with them trying to find like the support that they actually needed, and with the like, I know like with trans, like okay, you have a surgery, you go from one to the other, but in making that choice and then watching youth who had lived as one, like even though they had both sex, the parents that made them live as one, but it wasn't the one that they felt.
Right.
And that was what was so heartbreaking for me, because it's like I couldn't imagine. Well, I can't imagine not being able to be myself because of other reasons, like, you know, imposter syndrome and stuff like that. But I can't imagine just my true self and having to pretend to be something that I really don't feel
Right.
like I am for all of my life for appearances. And it was just like heartbreaking because it's like the parents that didn't want anyone else to know, and like just seeing how those kids felt.
Right. Yes.
Can we just, it's my place, I guess. I would love to see us just like destigmatize what we're talking about. Because I feel like, well, I'll just say it. So in my culture, and I'm black, I'm Trinity, but I'm black. So, when I was a CPS social worker, I had this wonderful family that had this placement, and they were ready to adopt, and then she came out. And they were like, and they had made all these connections, and then it just like crumbled because she came out. Because I just was like, what? And so, what I found from these particular parents and you know, some other parents, that doesn't necessarily have to be my race, is that their mind goes straight to the bedroom. And that's not, I mean, do your hetero kids like that? You don't. So, like, one, I think that's something that needs, like, we need to destigmatize anything LGBTQIA+, right? One. Two, I also believe that that we need not, like if someone says I'm bi or I'm pan, I've had resource parents say they're just gross, like they're just tell me now, right? So I there's so much work, and I mean, and you know, I can't imagine that they've changed their perspective that much. But how I got this girl to be able to stay and be able to be formally adopted is because they were like, they understood civil rights. So I said, when you, if we were, you know, in the 50s and 60s, and you walk outside, you cannot help that you are black. You are black. There's nothing you can do about it, so you're going to be hosed down. She would not come out, because they were saying it's a phase. I was like, she would not come out to you if she knew that you weren't going to jump for joy, but there is nothing that she can do about it. So they did do some conjoint and things like that. It still took a while. But, I mean, that was the only way that I could explain it to them, that I felt like they would moderately.
Yeah, of course. That makes sense. Thank you for sharing that. I wanted to say that intersex is as common as being a redhead. So I don't know what one out of how many ever, I don't have that written down, but it's as common as being a redhead. So it's not uncommon. And we talk about it, sometimes you'll see LGBTQI, and we talk about it because the Prison Rape Elimination Act, are you familiar with PREA, I'm sure, identifies intersex folks as a vulnerable population, you know, an at-risk population. So, as I said, I was saying that we've talked about sexual orientation, we've talked about gender identity, and finally we have gender expression. And what is that?
It's our standard, actually, of what cis should be, right? So if you're a man, then you are an auto mechanic. If you're a woman, you're a nurse and not a doctor. But I take out the trash in my house, so I don't feel like, you know, I chop wood from a fireplace.
Yeah.
With nails, like, so, you know.
Right, so there's a spectrum again, right? We have, well, I'll say something about this and then I'll say something about spectrum. So gender expression is simply the expression of one's gender, right? As is expected in society or not, because you can, like you're saying, you can be a particular gender and do things that express a different gender according to society. So in other words, let's say gender expression, some categories are masculine, feminine, androgynous. Do you know what that is? It's a mixture of both. So like Prince. Do you remember Prince? I don't know who's a more recent example. I need a more hip, like, to today. Harry Styles. Okay, do you know who that is? I
learned. I saw him on the Today Show not too long ago.
Okay.
Just kidding.
Harry Styles. And gender nonconforming. So you were talking about some gender nonconforming behavior, right? Like we expect that
So like
women don't do certain things.
non-conforming, even though she does express herself. I mean, she wears feminine clothing for the most part. If I've seen her on interviews and some of her lyrics, she'll say like, you know, I can do this, I can do that. Her song "Woman," she talks about the different that she doesn't want the world to be conform.
And who was that?
Doja Cat?
Doja Cat. Okay. So gender expression is the way through mannerisms or clothing or hair, jewelry, whatever that's outward that we use to express our gender. Pronouns, like when I introduced myself and I said I'm she, her, that was like an expression of my gender identity. So is gender identity, going back to that, your internal sense, is that something that you can tell by looking at somebody? No, I mean, you can't just know what somebody feels inside, right? We think we know based on what? On gender expression. We think we know, but we don't know, especially nowadays. You can't, I'm sure you're seeing that with the young people, right? That they say they're one thing, but they look something different to us. They're not gender conforming. So this is also a spectrum, and there's an exercise that we sometimes do, or that we often do, that I didn't bring today, but it's a spectrums exercise where I put myself on each of the spectrums of I tell you what my sex was assigned at birth, my gender expression, identity, my gender expression, and then I ask you to do that. And to volunteer to speak to that. And you can see people will say things like you're saying. I don't feel like all the way, like there's a line, right? And there's masculine and feminine. I'm not all the way over here. Like I say that, I'm feminine, but I don't wear heels and I don't wear makeup, so I don't feel like I'm all the way on one end. And if we all do an exercise like that, you can see how it's not so black and white, right? Okay, great. So we're done with the terminology section. Are there any questions before we move on? Yes?
I don't have a question, but I just wanted to I'm a sociologist, so this is gender is a social construct and all that to me. But what just sticks out is that, for things like this, before, I'm older, but growing up, it would just be it was a behavior or appearance, and it was the young girl or me. I wanted to wear overalls or big stuff. They would just say, oh, she's just a
Tomboy.
She dresses like a tomboy, and that was just it. So just to put all this, all this extra emphasis on people just being who they are, and with changing it, because we know before that when children were born, little girls would have blue stuff, and little boys would have pink, and it was closer to red, and then they switched it. So it's how do we? I always get confused. How do we know which one is the correct one? When I'm following people, so that's just what it is.
Well, men wear pink and earrings and.
I like men in pink. My son wears pink, and I think.
Right.
Nice pink. So
well, it goes to show it's an example of what you're saying about it being socially constructed. It's all we make it all up. We make it all up, and then we force people to conform to what we've decided is the right thing. And when they step outside of that, then there's consequences, right? Yeah.
Are you going to speak to I think sometimes parents want to, or the system, and maybe resource parents, I don't know, they want to support their child in their LGBTQIA plus status, but there's a fear. A fear of, hate crime, or, I don't know, broken heart, or whatever, which all that's going to happen. I mean, maybe not the hate crime, but that's going to happen. And so I don't know if it's the fear, because sometimes I don't necessarily think that there's a disagreement. Sometimes I think there's so much fear that it comes out as anger or.
I wasn't going to talk specifically about parents, but that's a great point. I mean, parents, I really believe, for the most part, want what's best for their kids, period. And so when they are engaging in behaviors that are rejecting of a young person's sexual orientation, gender identity, or expression, I think it's most of the time out of fear. Ignorance around, just the subject, and just fear that something bad's going to happen to their kid, and nobody wants that, right? So, but we know that the outcomes for young people who are rejected, aren't supported, are much worse than they are for young people who are supported. So it's important to let parents know that as well. Okay, we're going to move on. Okay, so we're going to talk about pathways into the juvenile justice system, and we're doing it in the form of a quiz, because like I said, you're going to be talking some more. So let's see. And you can just shout out. Or maybe, let's see, should we do raise your hand? I don't know, let's see. I'll see how I feel. Quiz question number 1. Everyone has a sexual orientation. I'm hearing only trues. Anybody say false to that one?
I say false.
Okay, tell me why false.
Some people don't, there's asexual.
That's what people often say, so I came prepared for that. Asexual is actually a sexual orientation. Yeah. So sometimes young people call themselves ACE, ACE, right? And there's an actual flag, a pride flag for asexual folks, and there's quite a bit of literature on asexual folks. So it's a sexual orientation. Is that what everybody else was thinking when they said no? Yeah. Okay, I tricked you. The answer is yes. Everyone has a sexual orientation. It's going to get harder, by the way. I promise. True, everyone has a sexual orientation. There you go. Everyone has a gender identity. A?
You're scared of being tricked again.
Everybody has a gender identity. True, everyone has a gender identity. And that's the reason we talk about how this idea of SOGI really came about, is to talk about not just LGBTQ people having a gender identity and a sexual orientation, but that everybody has SOGI. I used to start conversations when we first were using SOGI as who in here has SOGI in a training? And people would be like, don't know what you're talking about. I'm scared to answer. But everybody has a gender identity. Children begin to become aware of their gender identity at around what age? I heard A. Anything else? Anybody else? Okay, is there pressure to say A? Okay, A is totally the right answer. If you have kids or have worked with kids, young kids, you know that around 3 years old or between 2 and 4 is the same. Young people are talking about, I'm a girl or I'm a boy or whatever it is they are, and they're gravitating towards things, toys or activities that match what in their mind is a girl or a boy, or not just in their mind, in society's mind, what's a boy or a girl. This is true not just for transgender kids, because sometimes people think, that trans kids are the ones that know their gender identity, but this is also true for cisgender children. It's all kids. Children begin to become aware of their sexual orientation at what age? This is not fair because the ages, that range isn't that big, right? 8, 10, and 12. It's not that wide. So you can be right whatever you say. And just a reminder that this is not about what the bedroom, like you were saying. We haven't talked about the bedroom at all in this entire workshop yet, and we won't, unless you bring it up. Right, so it's about having those crushes, first, butterflies and all that kind of stuff. It's way before people, young people are sexually active. Okay, 10 years old. Approximately what percentage of homeless youth are LGBT nationwide? Oh, you know what? I fixed the slide. It is C. I fixed the slide but I didn't give you a fixed slide. Because it's 30 to 40% of homeless youth. This is a really high number. I mean, I think you know that. You know enough math to know that even if you're not math people, that 40% is really high, especially given that in the general population, LGBT people young people are about 7%. So you probably see these young people in your systems, right? Young people that are homeless and are having to do whatever it is that they need to do to survive on the streets. You're doing great. You already know that, though. Okay. What percentage of youth in foster care are LGBTQ? What was that? C. It's not C. See, now you're going for the high numbers because I know how this works. You're thinking I'm, trying to have a pattern here. Don't be dramatic. It's actually A. And if you think about it again, if there's 7% of the population, they're grossly overrepresented in the child welfare system. It's still almost 1 out of 5. That's significant, right? When you think about it that way. Let's see. And we have young people, of course, that are dually involved, right? That are both in the child welfare system and in the juvenile justice system. So girls with same-sex attraction are more likely to be disciplined in school than boys with same-sex attraction. Can't read ahead. This one's totally a trip for people. True. Girls with same-sex attraction are 95% more likely to be disciplined. Why is that? Why is that, do we think? That's a genuine question on my part because we don't know. But what are some of the thoughts you have about it?
Because boys are, there's a machismo, right? So like, they'll just outgrow it or they won't do it or don't bother them. Don't bother them within that. Like, it's kind of like when male children are molested, and oftentimes they're molested by women, but women are not largely prosecuted for that. So I think there's...
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah, that's possible. I haven't seen anything, but some people say it's because you see girls being more out than boys in school. Puberty happens earlier, right? The girls are more expressive, some people say. These are also some stereotypes that we have, but yeah.
Maybe girls are expected to conform more.
Yeah. Yeah, it'd be really interesting. I really don't have an answer for that, but it's been studied on several occasions. We've got at least 2 studies there that found the same. And we bring up schools because we know about the school to prison pipeline, right? So young people getting disciplined and getting suspended and expelled, the pattern of that sometimes leads to young people becoming involved in the juvenile justice system. So that's one of the pathways. So this is interesting. According to gender expression, so you remember we talked about GC is gender conforming, so you fit in the way that society expects of you in terms of your gender. And gender non-conforming is the opposite, right? And outcomes according to gender expression. If you see gender nonconforming girls have the worst outcomes almost across the board. Worse than gender nonconforming boys, except that gender nonconforming boys have a higher rate of homelessness, but not by much. So is that surprising that gender nonconforming girls have worse outcomes, or is that what you see?
I don't work in probation, so I'm
Well, wherever you work, do you see young people that girls that are gender nonconforming end up in more negative outcomes?
Well, I think it goes back to the one that you just showed us.
Mm-hmm.
It's, I mean, along the same.
Yeah.
You know, before we go on, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Back to that. I'm thinking again, my just personal experiences
Yeah.
with the girls that are in Group foster homes, as Jennifer Keys would call. The ones that are seem to not want to be too open to therapy. I don't know how to say it. They're not open to talk about it. They're not open to with the program, stay and tend to run more.
The gender nonconforming girls?
Correct. And the gender nonconforming boys, they're super open to therapy. They'll talk your ass off. But, they want to talk therapy. They just seem more open to therapy and working on their issues. That's just my little observation. So I'm wondering if there's been a study of why that number's so high for the gender nonconforming.
Yeah.
Why do they keep bouncing?
That's a great question.
Stay in the system,
Right.
as opposed to the boys who seem to really take in that therapy. They want to talk to them.
And that's really interesting because we often hear that for people who are doing like gender responsive programming, that's usually focused on girls, right? And it's like girls are more expressive, girls are more emotional, but you're saying something different. You're saying that you see more gender nonconforming boys. So what does that say for the kind of programming that we have for young people across the gender spectrum? Just a question.
Is it race related? Because we just had a speaker that spoke to at least Black, maybe brown, girls and boys being adultified, right? So like, if you have a lumberjack of a son, he could be 12, but someone would think that he is older and thus he's not a child. Like
That's right.
he's no longer a child. And I know that when I was a teacher, I read this book and I didn't even realize it, but I had been a victim to it. Like little Black girls are, even from the time that they're like 4, they're almost like identified as like little women. Like
Right.
so maybe that's.
Absolutely. And usually we talk about, we do trainings that are like 6 hours long. There's a whole section on intersectionality. And I will talk a little bit about race in a minute. But you're absolutely right. What are the expectations or the stereotypes we have of masculine, so gender nonconforming Black girls?
They're sassy. They have a smart mouth. They're like automatically resourceful, which is not good. So.
Right. Maybe more aggressive. Right. So race totally plays a role in all of this. Absolutely. Okay. We've got, I think, just a couple more. Which of the following groups has the highest rate of detention for behavior related to sex work? A, straight gender conforming girls. B, lesbian gender nonconforming girls. C, straight gender conforming boys, and gay gender nonconforming boys. I'll give you a minute because you have to do the thing of like gay and then there's gender nonconforming and all that. So I'm going to give folks another second. Okay, you got it? Okay, who says A? Raise your hand high so I can see it. Or low, as the case may be. B. And how about C? Nobody says C. And D. Okay. And the answer is D. Gay, gender nonconforming boys. So, what does this mean for like our CSEC? When we talk about CSEC, commercially sexually exploited young people, kind of the image of the victim, the survivor, is not this, right? And programming is often aimed at cisgender straight girls. So there's a huge gap and a huge need to revisit that in light of the research. Yeah.
Yeah, I would want to drill down on that data because in my experience working in both urban and rural settings, the overwhelming majority, and I think the key to that question is detained, who are detained.
Mm-hmm.
The overwhelming number of youth that are detained have been straight female girls, or at least those that have identified in that way, by a long shot.
Do we think that's what people are looking out for?
Well, I think in law enforcement, there's definitely a proclivity to concentrate on female sex workers, task force, and other type of efforts to capture sexually exploited children.
Right.
And so, if you look at the resulting number of admissions to detention, at least in the county where I work, and in other counties where I've worked, both urban and rural, the preponderance has been females who identify as straight being brought into.
Is there a social shame? Is that why they're being picked up?
Social
Because I
shame.
know, like, from watching, like, gay movements, that if you were to ask me about any one gay movement and you were saying how many, which population was more detained, then I would have picked this population because that's the population. So I don't know if there's some socialized, what I was talking, machismo, even it doesn't have to be, that's not related to race. Just
Right.
there's some sort of social masculine shame
Right.
to lock you up because of that. I don't know.
Right. Does the copy of the PowerPoint, is it too small to read the citation? Like in case if you wanted to go look it up, you could.
I think my PowerPoint is going to be available on the website for it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we should.
Okay, great. Oh, there it goes. There we've got another slide about overrepresentation. Thank you. It's just your presence. Overrepresentation of detention for sex work-related behavior. Check that out.
And by sex work, they're including exotic dancing, go-go dancing.
I'm assuming. So it's really high for gender nonconforming young people, right? It's LGBTQ or LGBTQ, GNC, young people. And it's almost double for boys than for girls. That's pretty interesting. Yeah. Okay, question 9. What percentage of youth in detention facilities nationwide are lesbian, gay, bisexual, questioning, or gender nonconforming and transgender? You can do this. We can do hard things. What do you think? Who says A? Say it proud. Who says B? And C? Yeah, the answer is B. It's the same, pretty much the same as in foster care, right? And again, remember the 7% in the general population versus 20%. 1 in 5 young people in detention facilities. Okay. What percentage of girls in detention facilities nationally identifies as LGBTQ, GNCT? Gender nonconforming, transgender is GNCT. This is just girls. Okay, who says A? B? And C. So it looked like B had the most, C had almost as much. It's actually 40%. Does that seem like it fits what you've seen? I'm almost positive that the statistic is 50% in California. This is a nationwide statistic. That's a lot of young people. That's a lot of girls.
And that's what I was just saying, because in the South and the Midwest, well, I mean, I can speak a lot to the South because I'm Southern, but there is, I would think that most of them were in California because our state is more accepting. I know plenty of Southerners that identify as LGBTQIA within their home.
Mm-hmm. But 40% across the country is pretty high. I mean, it's very high. So, it used to be that people said, well, we don't have any of those young people in our system, right? We can't say that we don't have any of these young people in our systems. Yes?
I'd also be really curious, because I know our population of girls has decreased so dramatically.
Has decreased. Oh, yeah, I know.
So I'd be curious, this was what, 5-6 years ago, what that looks like now, with fewer girls in custody. Has the percentage gone up? Or have we done a better job, on the front end in communities and keeping kids in general off detention?
Right.
But, because there are some days where I've got, 2 girls in custody, period, right? And they may both be lesbian at the time, or not, or whatever, right?
Right.
It'd be interesting to see with our population of girls decreasing as much as it has nationwide, how that is affected.
Yeah, because this is back in when? 2017. So it would be interesting. And lastly, the majority of LGBTQ and GNCT youth in juvenile detention facilities are white. What do you think? Who says A? Who says B? Wow, amazing. 85% of LGBTQ and GNCT youth in detention facilities are youth of color. What was that? Did someone say something? Oh, 85%. So we're mainly talking, when we're talking about LGBTQ youth, it's like we're talking about what is the population of young people in detention facilities, and they're youth of color. But we have this stereotype still lingering that if they're LGBTQ, it's the white kids that are LGBTQ, not the kids of color, black and brown young people. And we have to look at the concept of intersectionality, right? How systems of oppression, in this case, racism, and then also homophobia and transphobia all work together to further, what's the word? Not enhance, it's the opposite. You can say oppress, but I was thinking of another word. Young people of color who are LGBTQ. We don't have breaks in a 2-hour training, right? We just keep going, everybody's fine. You
Power
just take
through.
care of yourselves. Get up and go when you need to. Okay, great. Let me do a time check. Oh, we have you just said an hour to go? Yeah. Okay. Do ask, let them tell. I was trying to do a thing on don't ask, don't tell. There was a time, so I've been doing training and technical assistance with folks first it was in child welfare exclusively, then I moved into juvenile justice, probably for about, I have to do the math, maybe like 17 years. And when we were doing trainings back in the day, and not too far back in the day, but back in the day, we would say, do not ask young people their sexual orientation or gender identity. Do you remember that? Yeah, you don't go there. Young people, it's offensive, it's stigmatizing, whatever it may be. But we would say, create environments that are welcoming, right? So have posters on the walls that say that they're affirming, have pride flags or whatever symbolism, have books and magazines, wear pins, whatever it is. Use inclusive language when you talk to young people, not do you have a boyfriend to a girl, but do you have a boyfriend or a girlfriend or whatever. Create environments that are welcoming and inviting and affirming that will make it so that young people will come out to you. But don't ask them. Well, guess what? We want you to ask them. We're not going to know unless we ask, right? And we see from the statistics that they're overrepresented, and their outcomes are not good. They're really poor. They're very poor outcomes. So we want to ask young people. We have a little, let me see if that's it. So we have a little, this isn't working, let's see. Okay, this is Sean, and all you know about Sean, can you guys see that? Let's see, first let's do this. Get into pairs. So find somebody next to you, and then if you don't have one, let me know so that I can get you somebody. So this is Sean, and this is all you know about Sean. There's a lot you can't tell. Most things you can't tell about Sean by just looking at them. And we're going to do some interview practice. This is, the first one that we're passing out is a bad interview. Don't go ahead and read it yet. Don't cheat. Like people are studying it already. They're like, already we've been caught with wrong answers. I don't want to be caught this time with the wrong answer. I'm tempted to not tell you that this is a bad interview to see what you do with it, but I'm scared that in some way it'll seem like we're endorsing this interview. This is from actual language and conversations that have been had, either that we've heard or that we've been told about has actually happened. So you're going to use the script, and one of you is the interviewer. It says interviewer at the top of your page if you're the interviewer, and then Sean is the kid, the young person. And I'm going to give you a few minutes, not as many as 10, but maybe, I don't know, 5? 5 minutes because it's kind of short, to do the interview and then just talk about how it felt, how off it was, how on it was, how it felt to be the interviewer, how it felt to be Sean, all that kind of stuff. So I'll give you 5 to 7 minutes to do that. So go ahead. Okay, are folks ready? I've been hearing more talking, but is this good? All right. So tell me, what was it like? Did I have to tell you it was a bad interview? No, but did I have to tell you on the sheet? No, right? Okay, so tell me what happened.
I would say with my initial reactions is that there was just a lot of assumptions, like they were assuming the person wouldn't want to wear certain clothes, or they were just making a lot of assumptions about the way they dressed without asking them first what they thought and just letting them explain.
Right. Assumptions. Right. And we said you can't assume, right?
Well, I think when you come off and this like took me back to 1998 when I started working in the hall, right? Like the questions. But I think when you start off by saying it's none of my business, it sort of like sets the tone that
Right.
it's you know it's secret, it's private, it's taboo, but I have to ask because it's close.
Right.
Right? It doesn't really create a sincere, safe, open up to me and feel comfortable with transparency atmosphere.
Right. Because the interviewer is totally uncomfortable, clearly, right? But we still have people working in juvenile justice that are very uncomfortable, no? Yeah, because really, I mean, the young people, we say, you know, we ask young people to tell us their sexual orientation, gender identity, and such. They don't have a problem with it. It's the adults. We are uncomfortable. Some of us more than others. Clearly, this interviewer more than others. They led on to that right away. What else?
The whole opener to me is the same thing. It's very much like written by someone who feels awkward and doesn't know how to ask these questions, but you're trying to qualify them a little bit, you know, by being more awkward. And then I have the awkward record.
Right. Who was Sean? Who played Sean? And what was that like for you?
I was going to say as little as I could to be done with it.
You were trying to get the heck out of there, out of that situation? Yeah. Anybody else?
It's just awkward.
Just awkward.
Instead of asking, what are you most comfortable with the clothes? Like, that's what we would do now. What are you comfortable with? We don't say, you know, just so you know, we're giving you clothing assigned for females.
Right.
It's just,
Right. Okay. Are we ready to do the positive one? Okay. Same thing, but maybe switch up who's who. Okay, how was it this time? Tell me, how was it better?
It was not as, if you're comparing it to the last one, very direct, very short, very, I don't care, this is all I want to know, just answer what I ask. Where this one was more, tell me about your feelings, you know, very supportive, it's stressing support, and that we're here for you through the whole interview.
Mm-hmm. Not just checking off boxes, right? Anybody else? Yeah.
Well, I guess just the beginning of it, like, set it up so that I knew that the questions were asked of everyone. I wasn't being singled out.
Right. Because you looked kind of funny or something?
Yeah, and then, the other thing was that, they were asking them so that they could better support.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
It was more affirming that way.
Yeah. Yeah. What do you think?
much more respectful, more judgmental.
More respectful. It's definitely more also just conversational, and this person's a lot more at ease, right? Sorry? Safer. Yeah, I'm so sorry. I actually have some hearing stuff, so felt safer. Great. Okay. We're going to do something else now. We have some say bye to Sean. Bye, Sean. We have some case studies, and you can, I mean, maybe you'd want to get into 3s or 4s. Whatever, whoever's around you, get together. You got to move again, sorry. Just as you got comfortable. So here's your first case study. Oh, I'm looking at the wrong one. Okay. A 15-year-old Latinx youth who was assigned male at birth was caught shoplifting clothing from the women's department of a local store for the third time. What do you want to know about the youth's identity and how would you find out? What do you want to know about the family? Any services the youth has tried to access? The youth's motivation for stealing? And how would all of that information influence your recommendation to the court? How would you gain the trust of this young person? So, yeah, I'm sorry? Oh, you're doing it in a small group. Yeah. And I'll call time. I'll let you know when you have a few minutes left. These are your guiding questions. You can answer other questions too that you may have. All right, this group right here is like super chatty, so I'm sure you have a lot to say. Does somebody want to share from that group?
We got off to a slow start, because I think I kind of went off on a tangent why. We kind of assumed that there wasn't enough information given. Like, was this a transgender kid, or were they criminal activity, just stealing to resell? So I think we were kind of taking a minute to talk about that, and then it's the third time, and
That was totally fine to do. So what did you come up with?
probably stealing because the youth needed clothes, women's clothes, because we said the third time.
I looked at it and I said the question that I was first asking you is to know like what was their motivation for stealing. But me just looking at it and seeing that it was a third time and they were stealing, distinctly from a women's department store, I felt like if they were just stealing to sell clothes, that they could just steal anything. But maybe they're not getting the support and they don't have the money to buy like the women's clothes. And then I was like, gave the example of me myself as a teenager taking my mini skirts to school and changing in the bathroom. Like, you know, that's what people do. Like,
That's right.
you know, no, I had it and doing that, and then asking like, what services can I support you with? Like, do you need a job? Is there some type of job? Can we get you employment because they're 15? Then maybe get a work permit to assist them in being able, if they want to wear this, to be able to buy it themselves. Or like, I know that they get allowance, but asking the questions like, what can we do like to help you, and then wanting to just understand what's their identity, you know what I'm saying? Know that this is how they identify, but it was just specifically because it's just women's clothing and they're not stealing like soda from the store or candy or anything. It's just this, like, I would just feel, you know, like if this is what you want to wear, how can I help you not have to steal and to have what you need?
Right. You're also in the context of this training, so you're probably making some assumptions about that, right? How about folks in the back? Anything else? Anything you want to add? You on the you right here. This, yeah.
So we decided that you need to, first of all, that you needed to be more appropriate and that you needed to discuss other statuses and things about the person. Like, you don't just jump into, I wouldn't just meet someone and say, hey, do you have a boyfriend? Like, right? So like, you want to try to do as much as you can within that time period, nourish some sort of relationship. And then we didn't really think that we needed to know about, oh, I'm sorry. I'm still on Sean, sorry. But even still, we still wanted to nurture the relationship within that. Then, as far as the family, we were more trying to get down to the bottom of if this was some stealing for necessity. A lot of times it is. So there's that. Yeah. Oh, yes. So we did discuss a little bit about CSEC with them stealing from the store. And so that's also something that you want to broach carefully, because you don't want to just ask the youth outright if they are soliciting. So a lot of these things depend on the response about how, recommendations we would make, all of those things.
Great. How would the information for the people in the way back influence your recommendation to the court?
We talked a lot about cultural considerations, the Latinx youth, and maybe any potential language barriers that might come with speaking with the family, and how that might impact our recommendation would be maybe including some family counseling or maybe family advocate that can help the youth have some of those conversations with the family if there is some cultural considerations that might stop them from talking about their SOGI stuff with their family.
Great point.
We looked at it from both lenses though, from the kind of SOGI lens and also from maybe, we talked about just how maybe women's clothing gets a better resale value on the street if they're
Yeah.
crime, so.
I mean, we don't have a lot of information here, right? But you might have in your, I'm sorry, was someone saying something? Oh, okay.
I said that's super smart.
Yeah. Yeah. How would you gain the trust of the young person? How about that group back there?
Well, I think just like anything, right, you need to be respectful and treat them as a person and not, that there's anything to have any shame about. When you're asking the questions to dig in more. And I think we were hung up with the cultural stuff. We focused on perhaps there were
Yeah.
cultural reasons that they were identified in a certain way and the family didn't support them, and that led to that, the behavior.
If this young person, how would you find out if this young person is transgender, or does that matter?
You have to want to respect those pronouns and from their gender.
Right.
We have to ask people this like every day, 30 times a day, however many times to on the phone. We have to ask.
You ask them what every time on the phone?
What is their gender? We ask them their gender, and we also ask for their ethnicity. It's for a purpose of data, but it goes beyond that. We correctly address them because we have a lot of youth that fall in from STRTP and with the gender pronouns, and we can't just assume that because it's a female on the phone that our pronouns are she, her, or that's how she identifies. So when we're taking in this data, this youth can call back and they can get someone else. So it's important that we capture that information so that whenever any one of us analysts answers the phone and speaks to that youth, that we are addressing them correctly. I've had instances where I've asked youth and then I look and see their USCMS and they said something else to the social worker. So sometimes I clarify, I show, and they'll say, oh yeah, like how we talked about today, so now I understand about the fluidity. Oh yeah, I did say that it was they, them, but you can say she, her.
Yeah.
And so, and then you just document that because you just want them to be addressed appropriately.
Right.
You don't want to say the wrong thing because we only have a phone line to establish trust and communication, and if they hang up, then that's it. So we try to be respectful, but we don't want to disrespect them. So that is something, and that's what I had to learn, like how to ask. So my thing is, like, would it be okay if I ask you your ethnicity and your gender? That's my script, and that's just what I stick to. That's like, because it was uncomfortable for me at first, but it's information because I felt like I was imposing, like to ask someone that information. But then I realized that it's more important, so I do have to ask that question.
Right.
In order to, to keep the relationship. So
Yeah.
with that, so we do it all day, every time we take a call.
Does Does everyone ask pronouns? Like, what pronoun would you like? My pronoun is such and such. What is your pronoun? What pronoun do you use? No? It's an idea. Yeah.
Young people, if they crack me up sometimes when you do ask, because I think that they think that you know, all the concepts are new and evolving and all those things. So like, I was at Walgreens and the person that was working there had like these tattoos that were, you know, like woman's signal and then men's. And so I just said, oh, what are your pronouns? Or we were talking about something and I said, oh, I'm sorry, what are your pronouns? And she was like, whoa. Like, so I think that, you know, I think that there's also some age step that goes up within that, right? Because
Yeah, she might have been shocked that she didn't expect that from you, right? Like, what happened after that? After the whoa, what happened?
she was like, I'm she, her, hers.
Uh-huh.
And Stephanie, she asked me mine. And she was like, that's cool. Like, she didn't say too much. I mean,
Yeah. But she did tell you what her pronouns were.
yeah, but like, she definitely was like, whoa.
Yeah. Great. All right, let's move on to the next one. Jacqueline is a 16-year-old biracial, Black and Latinx former foster youth who committed an offense possibly warranting placement through probation and has come out as queer to a probation officer. Prior to the pre-placement CFT, Child Family Team, what do you want to know from Jacqueline? How would you decide which placement is needed if she doesn't want to disclose her identity? How would you select an appropriate placement if she does want to disclose her sexual orientation? What services does the department or the placement have in place to support Jacqueline? If none, what services should be provided and by whom? So that question of like, what services does the department, you're talking about your department or placement, have? And if not, if there aren't any services, what should be provided and by whom? Okay? Go for it. Okay, does anyone want to share out without me pointing to people?
I'll just do this. So we thought that it was important to, just for historical purposes, to know when she came out. Unfortunately, what we're doing, or not unfortunately, I guess it's just the facts. When you're doing any sort of placement, all of that information is going to be necessary. So we would want to know that, and then we would just ask her where she wanted to be placed, as far as the population. I was going to say, so I was a CPS social worker before I came here, and a lot of times when you are picking up a youth, my experience has been that they will be saying a lot of things and I will pay attention to those things. So they will be saying, you know, that's why I want to be here and I did this to them, that's why my sister was my mom, and so I would be taking all of that into account. I also, whenever I was given a new case and I had to go see it right away, I would try to read like their last 3 reports, maybe their last 4 chronos, because you have to have that historical knowledge. And then as far as the services that the department has, I can speak to Sacramento County, we were developing some LGBTQIA plus resource homes, trying to really find FFA homes that would nourish that particular youth. And then we did have quite a few wrap and fit services that specialize in LGBTQIA youth. So
That's great.
we said all those things.
Thank you. Anyone else? It's getting late, huh? Well,
One more thing we talked about in our group was just really to let the youth lead the conversation. So we were wondering that the person came out to the probation officer if their family is aware of
That's
that
right.
and if their events are, and if they're comfortable with these other people that are going to be at the meeting to know their gender orientation, and that if they're not, like specifically if they might be trans and present as a different gender than they look, explaining to them that it's important for the other people at the meeting to know in a professional aspect what gender they prefer so that they can be placed in the right home. And if they didn't want to disclose, you can just give them options like maybe like I can tell them beforehand if you're more comfortable with that, or you can tell them yourself that like it's these other professionals need to know so that we can all work to have the safest placement for you that is in line with what your expression.
Great. Anybody else? Has the lunchtime like slump really hit? We have a third case study, but we don't really have time for that. And I thought that instead of doing that, I would direct you to it, just if you're interested in seeing some more questions or possibilities of scenarios. And also, there's a section here at the end on tips for developing juvenile justice policy supporting LGBTQ youth that you can take a look at your own leisure. And I thought I'd leave it open then for the next 8 minutes, any questions that folks have.
I don't have any questions. I appreciate your contact.
Well, one thing I would mention is in terms of services, they are, I think the last case, they are legally, they have the right to mental health services by individuals who are trained
That's right.
to work with LGBTQ populations, and not all mental health professionals are trained. So they have a right to that, and then also medical services. So.
Right. And in detention, like Title 15, I took a section of it and printed it out in case folks are familiar with Title 15 regulations. There's regulations related to transgender and intersex youth. And just if you want to jot down the section that it is, it's 1352.5, section 1352.5. And it mentions that, the staff must refer to the young person by their preferred name and gender identity, gender pronoun, and the staff has to permit the young person to dress according to their gender identity. Also must house youth in a unit that best meets their individual needs and promotes safety and well-being, not be placed just based on their sex assigned at birth. And then to the point that you made, one of the points that you made, the administrative staff have to ensure that medical and behavioral health providers are well-versed in treating young people who are transgender and intersex as well. And then there's stuff around bathrooms and privacy. I didn't go over these policy tips, but you should take a look at them. And I'm going to give you my email address because I can send you a model policy that addresses. Can you see my, you have it. You have it in the handout. If you're interested in seeing what a policy looks like, you can contact me. You can contact me for other things too, but yeah, you're so welcome. Thank you. Yeah, have a great day.